4, 3.
The Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, episode 828 from Monday, August 10th, 2020.
Welcome to the Mac Observer's Mac Geek Gab, the show where you send in your tips, your cool stuff found, your questions. We share it all. We try to answer the questions. We add some context. We add some tips of our own. We allow ourselves to take a few tangents here as the muse strikes us. The goal being for each of us to learn at least 5 new things every single time we get together. Sponsors for this episode include BB Edit at barebones.com, Burrow at burrow.com/MGG, where you get $75 off your first purchase, and Cashfly at mac.cashfly.com. We'll talk more about all 3 of those later in the episode. For now, here in Durham, New Hampshire, I'm Dave Hamilton.
And here in Fairfield, Connecticut, this is John F. Braun.
How you doing, Mr. Today? Mr. Today? No, Mr. John F. Braun. I don't know. Maybe you are Mr. Today. Well, I don't know. I didn't look at the list. I could well be.
Yeah, but got through a little wind we had early in the week.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. That was something here in New England and elsewhere. But yeah. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, they actually, I saw this. A tornado actually touched down in the town next to me.
Wow.
For a very short period. EF1, I guess,
okay.
First category. So
yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And it's pretty exciting to drive around with no traffic lights because you know what people do? Whatever the hell they want.
Wait, we're not just supposed to treat them like 4-way stops? It's just free for all?
Hey, that's what you're supposed to do.
I thought so.
Don't get it.
Yeah, well, now you know. There's potentially one new thing everybody's learned. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. We were up in upstate Vermont where it also blew through pretty heavily. We were right on Lake Champlain and with a little Airbnb that we rented, and it was good. They had some outdoor living space there for us too, so we weren't just trapped in the house all day. But watching the storm kind of blow across the lake was pretty cool. Thankfully, we didn't lose power there, nor did we lose it at home. Surprisingly, other sections of even just our neighborhood did, but it flickered here. All my devices sent me various alerts that, on UPS power, off UPS power. I highly recommend, 2 things. I highly recommend if you have any sort of, electronics in your house, which if you're listening or watching this, then you definitely do, put them all on UPSs. I put our TVs on UPSs. I put our obviously my computers, my disk stations, especially, all those things are on battery backup units to protect against the spikes and surges and blips and all that stuff in the power. Mm-hmm. But I plug my Synologies, also my Macs, but my Synologies into the UPS via USB. And that way it knows that it's on power, just like your Mac can. If you do that, there'll be a new little thing in the Energy Saver panel where you can tell your Mac, okay, if you're on power, on battery power for more than 5 minutes, go ahead and shut down. There's all kinds of criteria you can use, but it really can save your stuff so that your stuff powers down appropriately. But with my Synologies, I have them give me email notifications when they go on and off battery power. And so there was a day last week where I had many of those emails, but it never, it would be off for, it would just be blips on and off. So thankfully, yeah, it's good. Should we do the show, John? Or is it just going to be this? Sure. I'm fine either way. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I did what happened? My Synologies didn't power. My computer is set up so that it'll come back on after a power failure.
Okay.
But the Synologies didn't for some reason. And one of them, so I had to turn them back on manually. One of them, I guess, powered down when it was active. So it had to, rebuild.
You need a UPS, man.
It was weird. Yeah.
Seriously.
Shop around.
Those Amazon, so there's 2 brands. I think I'm jumping ahead in the show here, but there's 2 brands of UPS that I have had really good luck with. And one of them is APC, right? Because, they've been making these forever. And they're great. Like, no problem. The other one that I tried kind of on a lark a couple of years ago is Amazon Basics makes, or they sell a UPS, and it's great. It's got USB connectivity, or it can. I mean, they sell different models. I'm sure they might make one that doesn't. You can check for that. But yeah, it's been rock solid, the battery, and it's been great. You do need to make sure your batteries in the UPSs stay up to date. You can replace them. You can always just order a replacement battery, or you can replace the whole UPS if you so choose. But makes a big difference, man, to just peace of mind wise, to know that like you're not going to have potential damage to your file system on your Synology. Because can you imagine? Like, I don't want to think about that. So yeah. So anyway, weathering the storms. Okay. I have had this problem a couple of times, and I have a quick tip to solve it. And I've seen other family members with it, so I'm assuming we're not alone. If you have a Gmail account and you're checking it the IMAP way on your phone, not the like Gmail OAuth way, I've seen it now, and it happened to me again last week, where I can check happily on Wi-Fi, but when I try to check email, or my phone tries to check email in the background, when I'm on LTE, it says cannot connect to the mail server. And and I've seen this before. And last week I finally had, it's a flash of inspiration, and it worked. When you're connecting via IMAP, you're using the insecure method, right? Because it's not using OAuth tokens. You're actually sending a password, albeit encrypted, but you're sending a password across. And sometimes it locks that out, and you have to go through and do what Gmail calls their reset CAPTCHA thing, where you log in, you do a CAPTCHA thing, allow it to do it, and then it's fine. And for me, I did this unlock CAPTCHA thing from LTE, and from that point forward, even though I moved around, it wasn't like a fixed IP address or anything, but somehow that was what it needed to open the floodgates and let me check mail in either scenario, which obviously makes a big difference. So I put a link in the show notes to the page at Google for this unlock CAPTCHA thing. So if you're ever and I've had this trouble on my computer too, but in this case it was on my phone, very specifically only on LTE, not on Wi-Fi. Was 100% fine. LTE, no bueno, until I did this, and then it's been fine ever since. So. Weird, I know, but we don't. It's not ours to question why. But it does remind me. I think a year from now, June of 2021, so less than a year from now, I think is when Google will no longer allow that type of connection, and you can do it the other way from your phone. But the thing is, I have one Google account into which, well, let's say all of my mail comes. That's not entirely true, but lots of my mail comes for different addresses. The Apple Mail app on iOS will not, and I think even Mac OS, but I need to test this again. But in iOS 13, I haven't tested it in 14. The Apple Mail app in iOS 13 and before will not allow you to put extra from addresses on a traditionally connected Gmail account. You have to connect as an IMAP account in order to be able to put different from addresses. And I have different from addresses. One of my from addresses, John, is feedback@macgeekgab.com, but I don't use that all the time. I just use it some of the time. So.
Wow. I think I heard you say feedback@macgeekgab.com.
That's right. Sometimes from the list, I want to select feedback@macgeekgab.com. If I connect to Gmail the OAuth way, I can't do that. So that's no good. So I got to figure something else out. I might move away from Gmail or Google apps for domains as my provider, because they're not going to be compatible with my life anymore. So anyway, that's that. Should we keep moving here?
Yeah, maybe you should put your certificate on there.
Oh, we'll talk about that next week, because I want to have the article updated before it's on the list for next week's show. Yes. Mail certs are coming back, folks. Mr. John F. Braun is on the case. Yes. All right.
Because that process is a little different. I don't know if you yet put your new shiny certs on your phone, but
thank goodness it's different. You can do it from the Files app now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, I think Jeff Butts is going to write up he's going to update all of our articles about how to do that. And once we have that, then he'll do that this week. And so we'll talk about it next week on the show. So we have a place to point everybody, because it's going to be confusing, and it's like better to have the conversation and then say, but go there, follow these instructions. So that's what we will do. But it's coming. Email certs, S-MIME certs are back. John found a free place to do them. So we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
For now.
Right. For now. Yeah. Hopefully it lasts the week so that we're not lying about next week's show.
Right.
Let's see. Listener John has a quick tip to share after my not so quick tip and tangent. He says, and it's a little geeky, but he says, I noticed today and a few times in the past that Time Machine was backing up a curiously large amount of data. Today it was 41 gigs, even though I had not added more than a few K of new data since the last backup. And so he did some research, and he found that he ran a command, which I will put in the show notes. It's a command called fs_usage is what he ran. And this command shows you, and there are other apps you can use to get this information, but it never hurts to have the terminal command. So it's a certain way of invoking FS usage. We'll put it in the show notes so you can just copy and paste it if you want. This is from listener John, and we have not tested this command, but it looks right to me. So, but it shows you an output that lists all of the things that it is, that the Time Machine, the backup D process is touching. And one of the things was a set of Backblaze files. And so it was backing up all of the Backblaze temporary backup files. Backblaze I think it's pretty smart about what it does. It stuffs all of the data that it wants to back up into a temp folder, and then sends that up to the Backblaze cloud, so that if you're changing files or whatever, there's no contention for any of that, because it can sort of do it asynchronously, which is good. But the in library root of the drive, so /library/backblaze.bzpkg is where all of this stuff was. So he just excluded that from his Time Machine backup. So the tip is exclude your Backblaze temp folders from Time Machine. Because that's, you probably don't need to back those up. They're already being backed up, and they're already a duplicate of what you have on the drive, presumably. Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. I exclude my photo library because it's multiple gigabytes.
Wait, yeah. And also backed up elsewhere for you, right? Like iCloud, and also probably your Synology, right? Yeah.
Well, that's why, because I use iCloud photos.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And virtual machines, I typically don't back those up with Time Machine.
Do you sync those to like your disk station another way to archive them or something?
Yeah, I got a few other things. Either they're on my clone, and I think I also upload those to the Synology.
That's good. Cool. Yeah. All right. We've been collecting a slew of questions about podcasts and audio and things like that. So today we're going to go through those and see how many of these we can address for all of you. The first comes from listener Brian, who says, I recently got a 5th gen iPod video. I stuck a 256 gig SSD in it, and now I want to fill it up with the podcasts that I watched and listened to while I was growing up, including Mac Geek Gab. He says, I think I've been listening since double-digit episodes. He says, I felt this made my question extra appropriate to ask. How does one download every episode of a podcast? He says, from what I've seen, Mac Geek Gab's RSS feed only goes back to episode 720 or so. This was earlier in July. I told you we've been collecting these questions. It says, which is relatively recent, and your website archives seem to go back to 611. Other podcasts, such as MacBreak Weekly, do list all of their shows online, so I suppose I could figure out the URL format and write a bash script to download them. But his question is, how can I download every episode of Mac Geek Gab, which I will rephrase as, is there a full feed of all Mac Geek Gab episodes? And the answer is yes. We have one. I'll link to it, but it's the link is, macgeekgab.com/RSS/MGG_all.xml. And there's a couple of reasons that we don't put every episode in the main feed. Maybe we could now, but Apple's engine did not like having that many episodes in the feed for Apple Podcasts or iTunes Podcasts. So I think we limited it to 100 and something, you know, and it just kind of rolls them out as new ones are added. So that's why that isn't there in the main feed. As to why you can't find them on the site, they are there. All the articles are there. But if you are just scrolling back through the Mac Geek Gab archive, you only see back to where we migrated from our previous publishing system to WordPress. But they are all there in search. They're just not there as part of that kind of, you know, scrolling archive, because getting those two publishing systems to talk to each other simply wasn't worth it at the time. And as every day goes by, it becomes less worth it. But the articles and show notes and all of that stuff, including episode 1, are all there, which wasn't called Mac Geek Gab. Trivia question. What was it called? You can email us at the previously mentioned feedback@macgeekgab.com address. So we've got a full feed for you. It's and I think it's linked from the main macgeekgab.com page too, that full feed. So there you go. You can listen to them all, including that first one. Ooh, it was rough. Every now and then it comes up, like if I'm shuffling, John, and I hear it and it's like, oh man, like our pacing was just like glacially slow. But it was, you know, it was we had to do it. You got to just get it out there. To anybody that wants to start a podcast, just start. It'll be terrible, probably. Ours was. And then it'll get less terrible over time. We're still working on it. So good?
Yeah.
Shall we move on? Okay. All right. Do you have anything to add to that? No. Okay. Let's see. Where are we? Listener David asks, last week my family was out of town. I had background music streaming from my iPad to several speakers over Wi-Fi. Libratone Zip. I don't know about those speakers. Anyway, Wi-Fi speakers. Says, when I sat down to eat dinner, I flipped my iPhone in and began streaming Mac Geek Gab on Overcast. Since the Libratone was running from my iPad, I had music setting my mood plus good conversation. It was great. Yes, I agree. It was luscious to have dinner together, David. Socially distanced, both temporally and physically, of course. I wonder whether there is some way to do both over my iPhone with AirPods. Are there apps that would let me merge and volume control both background music as well as foreground podcasts? My exercise walking would be even better this way. So that's really interesting. You want to hear, say, this show with some nice little music in the background. I don't know how this would be doable. This may quickly become a geek challenge. I think David's right, though. It would have to be a third-party app that was built to draw from these two sources and mix it together. I don't think you can have two audio apps. Like on your Mac, you could have two audio apps running simultaneously, and then that's that. But in terms of a podcast or any two audio sources, I mean, yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Any thoughts come to mind, John?
I never tried it.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think, you know, there's, gosh, off the top of my head, I can't remember, but there are multi-track audio recording apps for iOS, and there's one that begins with F, and it is completely escaping me at the moment. But I feel like running, so maybe somebody in our chat room at live.macgeekgab.com can help me remember. But, doing something like that where that is what you want, right? A multi-track mixer. And so you could load a podcast audio file and a song into that on separate tracks, hit play, and then adjust the levels, and you do you, right? You could have 3 podcasts playing at once. That would require a lot of mental acuity, or simply punting and just enjoying the cacophonous sound of the voices. But yeah, I think that would be it. Why can't I remember the name of that app? iPad audio multi-track. Gosh, I've used it before too. What is it called? Multi-Track Studios. Man, I don't know. It'll come to me, I swear. Like, you know what? GarageBand would do it on the iPad. That would be one way. Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Yeah, that would certainly work. I'm trying to think of others.
I mean, does Rogue Amoeba have something? If anybody did, I would think they would.
No, I know. That's the thing. They do not. Yeah. So but why not GarageBand? Because you can load multi-tracks into that, and you can open GarageBand files on your Mac. So that you could build it on your Mac and then just blast it across iCloud, and you'd be potentially in good shape. So I don't know. Yeah, interesting. I love thinking about these kinds of things. It's fun. Okay. Air conditioner wants to make noise. I really got to fix that rattly thing that it does. But alas, I will live. Okay. All right. Shall we go to Andrew, John?
Yes.
Okay. Andrew asks, let's see, there we are. I just recently changed to Catalina and then realized I didn't know how to import or add previous podcasts I had while using iTunes into the podcast app, or any other podcast app for that matter, in the Mac. I wish that they made Overcast for the Mac. So the question, how do I get my previous podcasts into the podcast app? Again, one that requires a little bit of cogitation here. As you upgrade from a prior OS, presumably Mojave, to Catalina, for me, the podcasts that I had in iTunes were automatically subscribed in the podcast app on Catalina. However, those same podcasts were also automatically subscribed in the podcast app on my phone. And that's because I choose to sync my podcasts with iCloud. And you can do that in settings on either device. So that is one way of sort of addressing this, is syncing them across iCloud. And then once they're in iCloud, they'll be everywhere. So I think that's the easiest way. There are some third-party podcast app available for the Mac. Overcast is not one of them, at least not yet, although who knows what Marco has planned. Probably not, given that he hasn't done it yet. But I know Downcast is available for the Mac. So, and that will also do your syncing. So maybe that's one way of doing this. Any thoughts on that one, Mr. Braun?
No, I checked, and I guess it's part of iCloud, because they were on all my devices and I didn't have to do anything. So
right, yeah, it is. iCloud. I get it, wanting to kind of be there's a level of technological purity where you're not relying on the cloud for these things. However, in terms of reliability for that kind of stuff, especially Apple's own stuff, iCloud's pretty good. It's not perfect. I mean, reference back a couple of weeks to our conversation about reminders and the disastrous path several of us had to go through to get that working. But, by and large, it really does work, especially for these kinds of things where it's, very specific types of data and those sorts of things. So, yeah, I have come to rely on it for those sorts of things. So anyway, anything else to add, my friend?
Oh, very good.
Cool. All right. Allison asked, and let me see if I can get the question up here. Yeah. I heard you mentioning the idea of moving to a Thunderbolt audio interface. This is intriguing to me, not because of latency, but because when I'm creating video tutorials, I get a lot of clicking, which is generally a buffer problem. She says, you mentioned ages ago, that was because I use a USB audio interface. I spend a lot of time re-recording bits of this and that because of this, and it's most tiresome. And this is Allison from Podfeet. She also does videos for Screencasts Online. She says, I'm interested in the smallest, simplest Thunderbolt interface I can find, and for obvious reasons, I don't want to spend a house payment on this. I found the Universal Audio Aero for $500. That's a 2-channel Thunderbolt interface. She says, one of my very simple set of requirements is that I have a hardware mute button. The big round volume dial on the front can be clicked in and it's for muting, but it says it's to mute monitoring. I assume that just means you wouldn't hear anything from the mics, but they still would be recording. Yeah, exactly. She said, so really with a threshold in the sub $500 range, are there any other Thunderbolt 3 audio interfaces you know of? So I have moved to Thunderbolt audio here in the studio, as I mentioned a while back. What used to be a hybrid setup of analog mixing and digital routing, I'll say, has now moved pretty much 100%. I mean, my voice is still analog, and I haven't figured out how to change that. So you still hear the air conditioner when it's making noise over there. But other than that particular spot in the chain, this mic is now plugged directly into a Thunderbolt audio interface, and from there it's all digital. And I have, as I mentioned, I'm using a Platform M Plus external control surface so that I have faders so that I can control my volume up and down and mix John and I together and all that stuff. But that's just controlling logic inside the computer. And the Thunderbolt audio interface that I'm using is the PreSonus Quantum 2626. It is one of the least expensive Thunderbolt audio interfaces that exists period. But also it is absolutely the least expensive one that exists with 8 inputs on it, and then you can expand it out. I actually have 2 breakout boxes elsewhere here in the room in the studio, so that I have actually 24 channels of audio in and out. And then I could do 2 more, which is why they call it the 2626. But this is, I think, $700. The universal audio interface is, I think, the least expensive of all the Thunderbolt interfaces at $500. That's only a 2-channel box. And then you get every other Thunderbolt interface is in the like $1,500 to $3,000 range to start, and you can go up from there. The beauty of Thunderbolt is twofold. Number one, it is high bandwidth, so you can do things like 24 channels of audio all around, whereas with a USB interface, at least right now, nobody's doing that. I think it maxes out at about 16. You can get to 18 or sometimes 20 if you cheat, but Thunderbolt has all that bandwidth. Also, because it's not actually going through any sort of interface like USB or FireWire, the latency latency is much, much lower, and PreSonus claims that theirs is the lowest latency of all Thunderbolt interfaces. That may or may not be true. I mean, it may be, but it's like it adds less than a millisecond of delay to the scenario. Where that's helpful is it means you can increase your buffer size and still have very, very low latency. And when you increase your buffer size, you avoid those nasty pops and clicks that happen when the Mac needs to catch up and reset its buffer, and you get this little clicking sound, right? That's what that sound is. Now, it's been a fascinating path being podcasters for the last 15 years, because when we started out, the only way to mostly and not completely avoid that buffer reset was to use FireWire. And where you get this buffer reset is when you do what we want to do, which is monitor the audio back from the computer in our ears. So we're hearing this stuff in very, very real time. So the smaller the buffer, the lower the latency, the better, because otherwise I hear myself on a delay, and that gets weird. As an aside, I got so used to the delay that I needed to have with USB, John, that months ago, maybe now, when we moved to Thunderbolt, the delay was too short. I was hearing I needed to artificially increase the buffers, and then week by week, I sort of, chopped them down to the point where now I'm okay with hearing myself much closer to real time than I ever had before. It was very bizarre thing to go through, because I went through it on the other side, obviously, when we had to. But started with FireWire, and then not that long ago, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, we found that Apple, had been spending a whole lot more time engineering for USB than for FireWire audio. And USB actually became more reliable and less poppy and clicky, but it would still happen. I have not had that experience, knock on wood, hang on, with Thunderbolt, largely because I have I'm using larger buffers than I would need to here because I can get this thing down, I think, to, 4 or 5 milliseconds, John. At the moment, I think I'm at like 12. So there's lots of extra processing room. And also I'm on a, 8-core iMac here. So that helps keep it moving along and all that stuff. So, yeah, but Thunderbolt interfaces aren't as inexpensive as they should be. And maybe now that we have, USB 3 with USB-C ports on our Macs, maybe there's an option for some of those audio interfaces to use more bandwidth. But I don't think you're not ever going to get around the latency issue of a USB interface because it's just another thing in the middle, right? Thunderbolt effectively is plugging straight into the motherboard, as close to straight in as you can, whereas the USB interface in your computer is plugging straight into the motherboard, and then you're plugging into that. So there is that translation layer, and that takes time. So there you go. But the U Audio ones are interesting. They have a processor in them so that like you can do effects on board and even control the voltages of the preamp from the Mac. So it can you can buy plugins. I could use a plugin here in Logic that would artificially via software make it sound like I was going through a vintage mic preamp or something because they had different voltages or maybe some variable voltage things or whatever. And that might color the sound in a certain way and you might like that. But that would all be sort of emulation in software after the fact. So taking the clean raw signal that I'm getting in through this interface and then messing with it. The universal audio interfaces have both a DSP and voltage controls for their preamps inside the interface. So the plugin actually tells the interface to change its voltages and truly emulate those things. So probably doesn't matter for a podcaster where you actually just want clean sound, but it's an interesting thing for musicians if you're looking to sort of capture different vibes or whatever. UA is doing some cool stuff, but probably not what you want for a podcast. Hardware mute buttons. Rolls makes one. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I will. It's an inline XLR mute button that is relatively quiet, I am told. So that may be what you want. So there you go. Yeah. Any thoughts on this, Mr. Braun?
No, I'm still happy with this little Yamaha here.
Oh, that's right.
Does the trick. Yeah. I'm still on a USB with this. Right.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, we gotta. Maybe it's time.
But maybe I need Thunderbolt. Do I need?
Think you might need it. That's the thing, John.
I need it.
Yes, that's the thing. But the only way to do it is either the UA one or this PreSonus one. The UA one's small. The PreSonus one's that I have is a 1U rack size thing. So, but I mean, it's fine.
Yeah.
It sits under my monitor. It's actually kind of nice to have it there. So yeah, it's fine. All right. Let's see. While we're on the subject of Thunderbolt and all of that, this conversation, we had part of this conversation when we were talking about the new Apple Silicon Macs and all that stuff. And there was initially a lot of concern. Apple has thankfully addressed this in a very clear way. There was some concern that because Apple moved away from or is moving away from Intel chips to Apple's own chips, that they would be abandoning Thunderbolt, which is an Intel sold technology. Well, Apple helped create Thunderbolt. And yes, it is an Intel tech, but Apple was very much involved in helping create it. And there's a lot of people that use it. And Apple has since made it clear that, yes, we will be supporting Thunderbolt 3 on Apple Silicon Macs. But it's also good to remember that, because this probably will come up and probably be confusing in the future, so we can all be ahead of the game. The USB 4 spec includes Thunderbolt 3 inside it. I know this seems very, the family tree of this is now like a bunch of, squiggly lines, not even circles, but USB 4 is over a USB-C port, and among all the other things that are included in USB 4 is the capability to transmit Thunderbolt 3 data streams. So in theory, everybody's going to be covered as the future comes, because presumably everybody will move to USB 4, I would think. Any thoughts on that, Mr. Braun?
Nope.
Okay.
No, but it's good they include it because, Intel, and Apple and some others, I guess.
Some others. Yeah, it wasn't just the two of them. I think you're right. Yeah.
Didn't they originally want to do it over fiber and then decided that's going to be a pain?
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was proposed for the initial implementation, but then they were like, yeah, people aren't really going to want to do that. So let's use copper.
So just run it over USB. Yeah. Interesting. All right. We have a couple more audio questions here, and then we get a ton of follow-ups. So I'm eager to get to all of these, but that's just what we love about the show. Andrew writes, is it possible to use the Mac as the input for a microphone, which then goes out to a Sonos as a loudspeaker type of setup? It is being thought of as a potential solution for teaching in a larger classroom where the instructor wears a mask and people in the back need to hear the instructor. Plus, the instructor can use the computer at the same time. So the answer is yes. Again, this easily could be a geek challenge. And if anybody has any thoughts, please share them. My thought on this is, if your Sonos is one of the ones that is AirPlay compatible, and all the current ones are, and really anything sold in the last, I think, 6 years is as well, then theoretically, yes, this is possible. Rogue Amoeba's Airfoil is built to do this and will do it perfectly, allowing your Mac to easily target an AirPlay device, of which the Sonos could be one. But using system preferences sound, you could also get there depending on how you're routing your audio from the mic itself. That's where things get a little interesting, because you need to take sound from this source and send it there. But a combination, Airfoil might just do it for you. But if not, then Audio Hijack, along with something like Airfoil, both from Rogue Amoeba, would do this. And there's probably other ways too, but we know what we know. So, I don't know. Any thoughts on that, John?
So you could, if you want to do karaoke by yourself, you could do this.
Essentially what this is. That's right. Yeah, it's you're essentially creating a karaoke setup, and you're sending whatever you want as the audio. I like it. That's awesome. You could just like bust out in the middle of a lecture to karaoke and like lean into, all this, we had to set this up. So
I'm not up on what software you would use for karaoke though.
I wonder, I haven't done any karaoke stuff from the Mac. I'm sure stuff exists. I mean, this setup, like you said, would absolutely do it. The question is there something more purpose built? Because if there is, then this might be the key. So that's interesting. All right. Fun. I love this stuff. All right. Jin asks, my question is, let's see, where it is. Here it is. For a podcast setup with two mics face to face on one MacBook Pro, what should you use for a complete setup? What mics, what software, everything. So, for me, if I were to do this, and this is essentially the setup that John and I would use when we didn't have to socially distance from one another, but when we were at like trade shows and things like that, if we were going to record in the same room, what you're asking is this setup: one computer sort of managing the whole thing, two microphones plugged in via USB, and then just software. So I would use two dynamic USB mics. My favorites are the Audio-Technicas. It's either going to be the Audio-Technica 2005 USB or the ATR 2100. I look on Amazon, whichever one is the least expensive that day is the one I buy. They are effectively the same microphone, so it doesn't much matter which one you go with. They look a little bit different, but they all sound the same. There used to be knockoffs. I think you still have one of the Knox audio knockoffs of these, right, John? Yeah. I don't think those exist anymore. I can't find them, right?
You know, I have to look. I think I got it at overstock.com. I'll have to search and see if they still have it.
Yeah. So that's what I would use, and I would go into Audio Hijack, which we mentioned in the last question. It's, you know, the nice part about Audio Hijack is also sort of the learning curve part that you can build anything you want. So I would pull the two microphones as inputs, and then I would route them very simply. I would just route them both to the same recording block, and you're good to go. If you want to adjust levels, then in line of each of those, you would put a volume block. So you've got microphone volume block into the one recording block, and then microphone 2, volume block 2 into the recording block. Think of it as kind of all merging together at that recording block. But yeah, that, you know, that's, and then you can adjust the levels. Then if you want to monitor in your ears, you can add output blocks, and this is how Audio Hijack goes. Hopefully that 30-second description of Audio Hijack makes sense. They've done a good job. When we started podcasting using the predecessor, oddly, I mean, at the time it made sense. Now, in retrospect, it seems weird. We were using Audio Hijack Pro. That product doesn't exist anymore. It's all just Audio Hijack. But there was no blocks. You had to think about what the wires would have looked like if you did it in an analog fashion and then do that in a digital fashion. It was very weird. But it would work the same way, just not visually. So this is much better. PJ, jumping back to Andrew's question, PJ at live.macgeekgab.com points out that Airplay is on a delay. It is. You will get some delay. So yeah, for the karaoke thing, you might want to use a Bluetooth speaker. That's still on a delay, but I believe it is less of a delay than Airplay. But yeah, you will have, you know, it's that latency we were talking about before. The more things, you know, it's just how computers work. You got to have buffers. And so buffers add time. That's how it works. So yes, you're right, PJ. That might be a little weird to have that. You might need to use, Bluetooth. I mean, Bluetooth will still have a delay, but it's potentially less, but it could get echoey. Yeah. You might need to wire something in order to do this in the right way. But you could put a speaker up at the front of the room and just wire it out of your MacBook and, you know, blast it to the kids in the back. Get line arrays. Line arrays are those speakers that you see at concerts when we used to be able to go to concerts, remember, last year? And it's a bunch of like sort of flat speakers that all kind of hang in an array. And each one of those is aimed at a certain section of the audience. And so like the ones that are aimed at the people in the front are much quieter than the ones that are aimed at the people way in the back. And that's how you get clear sound to an entire arena, because they can tune literally each section of the room. Now that your computer does it, they literally put up microphones around the room and just say, okay, go tune. And it does it. And then an engineer can kind of go around and, you know, he can tweak the levels as deemed appropriate. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So get line arrays for your classroom. It'll be awesome. Everybody will love it. Hey, you know, it's necessary in these weird times. So like I said, lean in, get the line arrays. I want to get some line arrays. I've always wanted line arrays. I don't know. Yeah. Let's see. Josh was asking about a wireless microphone. Let's see if we can answer this. Again, for teachers, he says, I'm being put in charge of preparing tech for some of our teachers for the upcoming year. They want to be able to teach lessons to in-person students, but also have the capability of capturing these lessons for remote students. I'm figuring that for audio, the best thing for them is to wear a microphone, likely a Bluetooth headset. Are there any that you recommend? Not sure what budgetary funds are allocated to this, so we might be able to shoot for the moon. Thanks for any guidance. Yes, of course. Yeah, a Bluetooth headset would be the most convenient from a no wire standpoint. Of course, you know, comfort and battery life may or may not be, depending on what you want. I think a good option would be an around the neck style headset that has the microphone in the neck piece so that you don't have something hanging on your ear all day. You know, if you're just looking to capture that audio, that's definitely going to do it. You know, you don't need something in your ear to hear from. You just need something that's going to capture audio on your body conveniently. And the nice part about those around the neck ones is they have you know, bigger batteries usually because they're not, you know, size constrained because they're trying to fit inside your outer ear. I found one. I have not used this, but I believe Josh has got one and tried it since this question came in. It's the Bear 2 foldable neckband wireless headset with retractable earbuds. So it is a set of headphones because that's probably the easiest way to get it. They're $40, so relatively cheap. And it's got the microphone in the neckband. So you could just leave the earphones retracted and just use the microphone, pair it up with your Mac or however, you know, whatever kind of computer you're doing. And then there you go. I don't know. From Bear 2, BARTWO. I've never heard of them. But for $40, it's probably worth testing it out and see what happens. And there's a ton of them at Amazon. Just search for neckband headset and you'll get there. So any thoughts on that, John?
Back in the day when I did some audio work or speech recognition work, actually, I used Shure.
Okay.
As a nice array of products, either handheld mic or headset and stuff like that.
Yep.
I don't have any specific recommendation, but that's what we used.
Yeah.
And I guess I forget what frequency it was. I guess whatever they wanted to use. But
so it wasn't Bluetooth. It was like their own proprietary plug a dongle in kind of thing. Oh yeah, all right, well, that's cool.
Right, and I'm looking quickly here. So they have either handheld mics or a headset, and then a bass, and then that you would, I guess, pipe into the computer if you want to and record off of that.
That makes sense. Yeah. Huh.
Which is what we did. So we were profiling various speech recognition systems, and so we would use. It served two purposes. One is that we would record audio clips and then submit the audio to each of the engines and see which one did the best. So we were gauging the accuracy, and then also if we were doing a presentation, demonstrating the technology, we could be wireless and walk around and stuff. Yeah, that was fun.
That's good. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I like it. That's good. All right. We have a ton of follow-ups that I want to get to. And I also want to talk about all of our sponsors, if that's okay with you, Mr. Braun.
Okay.
All right. Summer is all about relaxation, and whether that means going on vacation or just laying out with a good book, it's time to chill a little bit. Well, this summer, travel plans aren't exactly what they normally are they? So you can make your at-home staycation as relaxing as possible and lay out on a comfy new sofa from Burrow, our next sponsor here. Burrow is practical and versatile because you go and pick. If you go on their website, go to burrow.com/MGG and check it out. They've got like 23,000 different permutations so that you can get everything exactly the way you want it, from the fabric to the arm height to the material of the legs to the number of seats. And I say fabric, but you can also choose leather. And what's cool is you can swap out things like arm pieces, or if you have like a pet incident, even replace things. But the fabric is 100% pet friendly, which is super important because our pets are at home with us this summer too, of course. It's scratch resistant, stain resistant. They tell me that wine will even come out of this. It's like building blocks. They build most of it for you, but you sort of put the rest together because, they ship it to you. Yes, they ship it to you. And you can assemble it in minutes by yourself with no tools. Add or remove seats as needed. You can convert a love seat into a sofa or into a sectional and back. And if you use our special link, you get $75 off your Burrow purchase. Plus, their fast and free shipping. Again, at burrow.com/MGG. So check out the site for details. That's burrow, BURROW.com/MGG for $75 off. Our thanks to Burrow for sponsoring this episode. I love BB Edit. I love BB Edit 13.1. I know, I'm crazy. I love a text editor. But you would only think I was crazy if you hadn't yet checked out BB Edit. Trust me on this. And that's why I'm really excited to talk about him here as our next sponsor, because BB Edit, it's there to cure what ails you, especially with all your tech stuff. You want to compare files? Easy. And not only easy, but so meticulously put together. You tell me, find me the differences in these two files, and it'll show you not just line by line differences, but differences in the same line. So if you've got one of those things that maybe you're trying to compare some like minified JavaScript or something like that, well, it's all on one line, or lots of it is, no problem. You just scroll through and it scrolls both windows. It's so cool. Like, these people that make this are geeks, right? Just like us, but they're geeks about their thing. We're geeks about our thing. And it's so nice to use tools that are built by geeks about the thing that the tool does. I think they even use the tool to build the tool. It gets very meta and makes my brain hurt, but that's why they're the geeks on this. And we just get to benefit from all that luscious geekiness. So go check it out. No matter what you need in a text editor, even if it's just for counting words or counting characters, BB Edit is the thing you want to use. Go check it out, barebones.com. You can download a 30-day free trial from there. Even after 30 days, a lot of the features still work, especially the ones that are sort of more commonplace, to be perfectly honest. So you might be able to just use it for free, but go check it out, barebones.com. Our thanks to Barebones and BB Edit for sponsoring this episode. CacheFly. We always say that CacheFly provides the bandwidth that gets the show from us to you. They do that, and they have been doing that for well over a decade for us here. Thank goodness. You don't notice them. That's the beauty of it, right? If we didn't have them, you'd notice them. Well, they do more than just provide the bandwidth. They do all kinds of things, including increasing the speed of your website. With their new web optimization capabilities, all of your content will be optimized before it's delivered to visitors without requiring any development effort from you. And with the recent addition of CacheFly's flexible edge application platform and implementation services, their capabilities reach far beyond those of any traditional content delivery network. They've got APIs so that you can solve all your weird, specific content distribution problems. They'll do all your on-the-fly next-gen image optimization for you, application load balancing, smart asset delivery, all of it. If your website's directly tied to your revenue, and I assume it is, you want to optimize your site's content so that you can get faster speeds. And the good people at CacheFly are even going to provide a free optimization consultation for you just because you're a Mac Geek Gab listener. That's right, just for you. So you can know exactly where your site stands today with a Lighthouse score report and learn how CacheFly's web optimization solution can help add 60 points instantly to your score. Visit mac.cachefly.com. That's mac.cachefly.com. Our thanks to CacheFly for sponsoring this episode. All right, John, let's get to some of these tips, shall we?
Indeed.
I want to, James has one to share. James says, it's probably a quick tip, but he says, when I opened my calendar, I noticed that duplicate birthdays were being displayed for each and every person. After trying many things, this is how I finally fixed it. Open calendar, click preferences, uncheck, and then recheck Show Birthdays Calendar at the bottom of the General tab. After doing this, only one birthday is being displayed. I've seen this before. I don't use Apple's calendar primarily, so I don't always see it. But I love the turn it off and turn it on. I love it when that works. That's a handy thing. And it reminds us that, you know, all that's happening when you do that is it's writing an entry to a plist file or removing an entry. And it probably had an extra entry there, so it cleans it up and you're in good shape. So thank you for that, James. Good stuff. Right?
Yep.
Okay.
And Bob has a follow-up, which is a useful one. We were talking about the touch bar a while ago and how you can make it do things that you used to be able to do, but can't anymore because they got rid of certain keys. The touch bar has a screen lock button. We mentioned this, Dave, but to put it in context, what the screen lock button does that doesn't really advertise is that if you tap on it and then you sit around for a while, actually, I found it a matter of seconds, your screen will turn off if nothing happens.
Oh.
The reason we mention this is that one of our listeners wanted to be able to sleep the screen, but not the computer.
Right.
And, this looks to do that.
Huh.
So
that's pretty cool. And that works for you on your MacBook
yes.
Pro with
yeah, the thing is, I couldn't figure out, and I don't know if there's a way to set this. I don't know if you can set the amount of time before it decides that it should shut your screen off.
Right.
I wasn't able to find a setting for that.
Huh.
Again, on my machine, it was just a couple of seconds.
So when you hit that, does it display like a thing saying, what do you want to do? And if you just don't do anything, it sleeps the screen?
Yeah, well, it brings you to the, login screen.
Oh,
yeah, screen
right.
lock. So it locks your screen, and yeah, you either type in your password, or if it doesn't think anybody's there, then it shuts the screen off.
Shuts the screen down, but it doesn't sleep the computer. It just sleeps the screen.
Correct.
I wonder, is there a way, like, is it in desktop and screensaver? Like, I know there are places where you can say,
saver maybe.
Yeah, sleep the login screen if no one has said anything. And I might be making things up here. I think I'm making things up, but it feels like that's a setting I've seen before. Is it in security and privacy? General. No, it's not there. Well, show a message when the screen is locked. So, if you go into system preferences, security and privacy, general, there is a checkbox for show a message when the screen is locked. I'm guessing if you had, I don't know, maybe it doesn't make any difference. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
All right.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah. It's good. Indeed. All right. Richard, following up from last week's episode, he says, in response to Steven's question asking about push notifications from one iPhone to another, Richard correctly points out, Steven just asked about texts and calls, not necessarily third-party apps. If they are using the same Apple ID on both phones, then yes, they can receive iMessages at any time on both devices by going into Messages settings and choosing which devices, numbers, or email addresses you want to receive messages from. This also works, he says, for FaceTime. For phone calls, you can use Wi-Fi calling, but you would only receive calls from your other phone when both phones are on the same Wi-Fi network. When not under Wi-Fi, you can go to call forwarding from your work phone and put in your personal phone number. I have the same issue, and I don't want to mix my work and personal phone. I like this, Richard. This is good. This is good. We've got some other answers for this, but this is good. All right. Brad, addressing the same problem, says there is a third-party company, an app called Umail. It will act as your message receiver with custom messages, but it will forward to a different phone with a text and also an email if you want. He says, I use it to forward my emergency calls from the office to me. Thank you, Dr. Brad. That's interesting. Umail. Okay. See, I love it. I love it when we all come together and solve these problems. This is good. Allison wrote in and said, I would have sworn we mentioned this in the show, but I guess we didn't. Maybe I dreamt it.
I was thinking it.
Okay, there you go. I read your thoughts, John. That's what it was.
Yes, that's what happened.
That's what happened. Yeah. Allison says use a dual SIM or the eSIM features in the newer iPhones to share alerts, right? Because you could put, put one of the numbers on your eSIM and the other number on a regular SIM. And now you've got two SIMs, two numbers, two everything, and everything's right there. So that, yes, that is another solution. Perhaps the most obvious one. I like the others because, they get creative, but that would be sort of I bet if you asked Apple, this would be the official solution. So anyway, there you go. Good. Cool. Thanks everybody on that one. Going back to episode 826, John, about sleeping your Mac's display. This I like. Where is Ken? It would be alphabetical, wouldn't it? Ken says, I wanted to share my own solution to the display sleep question that was asked. And so this would work for people with touch bars too. He says, like a lot of folks, I schedule my disk copies and virus updates and scans during the night when I'm not using my Mac. However, since my Mac Mini sits on my desk in my bedroom, this often results in my screen coming to life at 3 a.m., sometimes just as I'm trying to get to sleep. My solution was to create a Siri shortcut that has one action, run script over SSH, whose script reads, PM set, display sleep now. I will put this in the show notes so that everybody has at least the same starting point. And he continues, he said, by saving this script with the name sleep computer name, I'm able to turn off the offending monitor with a simple, hey lady, sleep computer name. This has made my nights much more tranquil. Of course, for this to work, you do have to allow SSH access in the sharing preference pane. He says, keep up the great work. And of course, never get caught. So thank you, Kevin. I like it. That's good. That's the kind of geeky solution we look for here. It's good, but that's not a bad solution. That's using all the interfaces, and nice to be able to do from across the room. So I like that. Any thoughts on that before we continue with these follow-ups here, John?
Let's go.
All right. Bob, in the last episode, we were talking about changing usernames with listener Robbie. And we mentioned the alias field in that section in what is it, account settings, John? I can never remember. So you go to system preferences, users and groups, right click on you got to unlock the thing, of course, because that's how that works. Right click and choose advanced options. And in there, you will see aliases. Now, Bob tells us how he uses aliases. He says, the alias field is a way to log in with a different name. He says, so if your short username is Dave, then you could create an alias Dave the Nerd and also log in with Dave the Nerd, same password, same credentials as Dave. He says, this came in handy for me when I just used my last name as my username on my personal Mac. And then when I joined my current company, they used my first name and middle initials prepended to my last name as the company username. When I went to SSH from my work Mac to my personal Mac, I had to constantly specify my username. So instead of saying, SSH iMac Office, he has to say, SSH, whatever, Bob, middle initial, last name at iMac Office. That is like for, we're civilized people here, John. We don't want to have to do this. He says, so I created an alias with my company username on my personal Mac. And now I can SSH in with just the name without needing to, with the name of the device without needing to specify a username, as the default of my work name was now an alias on my personal Mac. He says, I spend a lot of time using SSH and SCP and things like that. He says, so it was very nice to be able to create that alias. Fascinating. Thank you, Bob. I had no idea. That definitely was on my one of more than 5 list for today. So good. Thoughts on that one, Mr. Braun?
Yeah, it's good to know that, because right now when I look at least on this machine, there's some weird com.apple.idms.appleid.prd. bunch of numbers there. And I'm like,
I wonder if that's the iCloud like ID because you can log into your Mac with your Apple ID from others. So I wonder if that's like the serial number, the serialized version of your Apple ID for that. It sure seems like it, you know?
Yeah. I'm not going to touch it.
No, I wouldn't mess with that. You may never see your Mac again.
Well, per the warning that they have in that dialogue.
Oh, does it say don't?
Oh, it says changing these settings might damage this account and prevent the user from logging in.
Yeah, I would say that's probably right. Yeah. Okay. Last week, John, we talked about creative options for increasing your rural broadband speeds. And Gerard, Chuck, and many others sent in something we completely missed. I didn't even know about it. But Gerard writes, he says, I was listening about this, and SpaceX spinoff Starlink is building a low Earth orbiting network of satellites to provide high-speed internet. Your reader with the slow internet problem might want to go to starlink.com and try to get into the beta program for it. They're looking for emails, service addresses of people interested in trying it out. He says it looks like there's already substantial interest. He shared a couple of articles, and Amazon is planning a similar service, but is further behind. So, yeah, they're saying that this could do, 600 megabits a second. And I guess because they're doing lower Earth orbit, the latency isn't going to be as much of a problem. I'm not quite sure how the tech works.
That's the feedback that I've gotten from people that have used satellite, is that the latency is terrible. You can't do certain things just because the round trip is awful.
Over a second and stuff. Yeah, that blue, what was the name of the satellite service? Blue Streak or something. That's not it. But I had used one when they had that up at my father-in-law's house on the lake initially, before they could get DSL there. And yeah, I mean, you could get a stream going, but like you said, latency was, 1.5 seconds, 1500 milliseconds or something. So it was no bueno. So John, our timing of last week's discussion was very interesting because we got to this. I mentioned earlier in the show that we took a couple of days and just the four of us went and stayed in this house that we rented on Airbnb in northern rural Vermont. We were 2 miles from the New York state border, and we were even closer than that to Canada, right on Lake Champlain. We could not cross to Canada because we did not have essential business there, so we didn't even try. But we drove past the border crossing several times, going to pick up like takeout or something, on the other side. But they said they had Wi-Fi in the Airbnb listing, and we get there and, we could getting settled and unpacking. And my son had, for the job that he was doing this summer, he had a couple of Zoom calls that he needed to do even during our, week away. And I checked the bandwidth because I always run a speed test when I connect to a new Wi-Fi network. And they were on DSL there. The Wi-Fi signal in the house was great. Like they had bought a separate connection for just this guest house on the property, which is good. We got a full, John, 2 megabits down and 0.8 megabits up on this Clear Channel DSL. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I don't think that's going to work for your Zoom call. He tried it and it like sort of worked. It was okay, but it was like, if anything, it was barely enough and probably just shy of that. Thankfully, we had this discussion on the show and talked about different options. And of course, I immediately thought, all right, well, tether to your phone, kiddo. Let's see how that works. Thankfully, even though we only had, 1, maybe 2 bars of LTE, but mostly just 1, but it was a solid 1. We were able to get 65 megabits per second down and 25 megabits per second up. So he just tethered to his phone, and a Zoom call, for anybody interested, takes about 1 gig of bandwidth per hour is what we found. So totally fine, and totally, thank goodness they had decent cell service there. So now the TV was interesting. Netflix had no trouble over the 2 megabit stream. Hulu had no trouble over the 2 megabit stream. Surprisingly, and I don't want to say surprisingly, impressively, Plex did the best at figuring out how to navigate that stream. They had Samsung smart TVs there, And first of all, having experienced both LG's smart TV and Samsung's smart TV interfaces for their newer ones, Samsung's is awful. I mean, terrible. I'm very happy that I experienced LG first and that we've got LG here at the house. I don't know what the people at Samsung are thinking, but it's not about user interface for the TV. I mean, it was functional, but it was terrible. But so Plex was amazing. It had, we downloaded the Plex app to the TV. Between the app and the server, and I'm talking about like my Plex server here at the house, they quickly negotiated the bandwidth between them, and we never had like any artifacts on the screen or any, it just looked like a great picture, even though it was being, shrunk down to, a fraction of what we would normally see or whatever. Apple TV Plus, unwatchable on 2 megabits of bandwidth. It would not scale down appropriately and get there. Like, it wouldn't even start playing. It would just time out. One night we wanted to watch something on Apple TV Plus, so I tethered the TV to my hotspot on my phone, and then we could watch it. It was fine. But yeah. So yeah, so I shared all the details that we came up with in the show, and then I saw these emails from Gerard and Chuck and everybody else about Starlink come in. So I shared all that with my Airbnb hosts and was like, hey, because they're frustrated about it too. They're like, yeah, we used to live in like civilization and we were able to have like Xfinity. So they don't complain. A lot of people like to complain about Comcast Xfinity. They don't have any complaints anymore since now that they've experienced, rural, quote unquote, broadband. Broadband's a relative term, John, I think, depending on where you are. So there you go. Wild Blue was the satellite service. Thank you, Brian Monroe. That's the one. I knew it was Blue something. So
yeah, I remember when a T1 was a big deal.
Yeah. 1.54 megabits per second, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I had that thought while we were up there. I was like, well, our connection's faster than a T1. Yeah, so is everything else. All right. Where are we on time? Oh, yeah, we can get through these tips. We might even have time for a couple of cool stuffs, John. Yep. I'm curious, actually, about this next one to see if you've experienced this. I definitely did. Kenny writes in. He's been using Eero. And he says, just a heads up, my Eeros are first gen, and I've never had any connection problems before. But lately, I was having a problem with losing internet access on my Eero connections. I was still connected to the Eeros, so it would associate with them, but I couldn't get to the internet. This would happen on my MacBook Pro, my iPhone, and my iPad Air. And it happened on an almost daily basis. Disconnecting and reconnecting from Wi-Fi on the device in question would temporarily resolve the issue. I suspected that my problems might be caused by one of the 2 beta features I was using, and he had enabled both band steering and WPA3. So, true to troubleshooting nature, he turned them both off, and the problem went away. So now, to figure out which one, he turned band steering back on, problem stayed away, and I would agree with him that Eero's at least current implementation of this beta WPA3, WPA2 mode is no bueno with at least some Apple devices. I when I was testing it, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago here at the house, I turned on WPA3 and I was having exactly what Kenny describes. I couldn't roam around the house. Anytime I jumped to a new thing, it was just like, yeah, no. It's yep, same exact symptom that he saw. And I turned off WPA3 because I knew their band steering was working okay. I turned off WPA3 and it exactly the same thing. So do you have that on? Have you enabled that for your Eero yet, John?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And at one point I was like, did I? So, we mentioned it before, mention it again, but I see this. So if you hold down Option and you click on the airport menu,
yeah,
one of the things it shows is, security, WPA3 personal.
Okay.
I have not had that issue.
I wonder
I got tons of devices. So my phone, my computer.
But I wonder if your devices roam all that frequently. Because I think for me, it was when I roamed from one access point to another.
I see handoff messages. So where do you get those? Dabuki. is one tool that will show that. And yeah, I'll see, or is it Hardware Growler? No, I think it's Dabuki.
Okay.
Where I'll get a notification and it's like, hey, by the way, you jumped to a different access point.
Okay. All right.
It shows the old and the new one and the MAC address. It's interesting though, because WPA3, if you have it available, and it's worth trying because it offers a lot of benefits security-wise.
Okay.
Yeah, and remind people of this. We may have talked about this at some point, but even if we didn't, here's some of the I think the coolest thing about WPA3, or at least reportedly, I'll have to get a packet sniffer. It encrypts public Wi-Fi connection. It's secure.
Oh, even if you don't have a password for your public Wi-Fi connection.
Correct. Yeah, so that's one of the problems with older implementations.
Right.
And then it has, let's see, I'm looking, I got a little article, I'll link to it here. But yeah, so privacy on public Wi-Fi networks, protection against brute force attacks.
Interesting.
Easier connection for devices without displays. Okay.
Okay.
And, then, and higher security, I guess 192-bit.
Okay.
Something or other. But the neatest thing is the easiest way for people to maybe sniff your data traffic is if you log into a Wi-Fi network without a password.
Right, because with WPA2, no password means that your data connection is not encrypted. It's only encrypted if there's a key in there.
Right.
So WPA3 adds a session key no matter what.
Yes.
Interesting.
That's what this little write-up claims. So,
oh, that makes sense. I like it. Okay. All right. So we should, in our homes, having, the better security is good, but we're all probably using passwords in our homes. So at least there is some security. But for public Wi-Fi, that's a good thing to check. See, I'm learning these things, man. This is why I do this show every week. It's good. Well, plus I like talking to you. It's good. And all of you. There's a lot of reasons. It's not the only one. But I do like to feed the brain, Feed your head. Isn't that what Alice said? Is that what she meant? Just what? That's what Alice meant.
10 feet tall. When she's 10 feet tall.
When she's 10 feet tall. Yeah. Yeah. Listen to Matt Geek Gab. That's what Alice said so. Like, we can't, I don't know. All right. Let's see. Stuart. Going back a few episodes, he says in 825, Todd was having issues with color accuracy over HDMI. He says, while I was researching a monitor purchase a while back, I stumbled over a video from BenQ explaining that you should avoid HDMI for color accurate work. According to the video, HDMI can have an issue where the color data gets truncated. RGB color gets chopped from 0 to 255 to 16 to 235. Perhaps this is a contributory factor in Todd's color accuracy conundrum. Say that 10 times fast. That's got good mouthfeel. Color accuracy conundrum. It would seem that this isn't always the case and can depend on individual hardware. BenQ Video recommended either using DisplayPort or USB-C where possible, as they have more bandwidth available. Interesting. That certainly fits with some of the things we've seen in that it's not 100%, but some of the time. Yeah. Cool. All right. I got one more on our list, John, of follow-ups here. Anything to add to that one? Okay.
No, I seem to have gotten extra bits with my HDMI connection. I don't know.
Well, you're living the dream over there, man. It's good. WPA3
yeah, I think I told
works.
You. When I look in display, I think it says I got 30 bits. It's like, wow.
Okay.
So I got extra bits, man. I don't know where they came from.
Well, you bought them. Yeah, you spent the extra money on them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mitch writes, he says, I just listened to Mac Geek Gab 825, and I have a comment for your section of the podcast about best implementations of two-factor authentication. While this tip might not be helpful for the person who already has 37 previously registered sites in Google Authenticator, while going forward, this can help greatly. He says, it's a tip from, of course, Steve Gibson at GRC, who suggested a solution in March 2017 of printing or somehow saving screenshots even of the QR codes that you use to register the site. So those QR codes have essentially a URL in them that sends that tells your one-time password generator the code and frequency to use to match the one-time password generator on the other end. And so if you save those QR codes, or if you convert them to URLs and save the URL, as long as something can import the URL, like a 1Password or something, then you're good to go. Mitch says he's been using this method since 2017, and it works to perfection. It helps not to get caught. Yeah, so I would say both, the URL and the QR code, because that way you got them all covered. So thanks, Mitch. Good stuff. We have a I'm going to jump us to cool stuff found here, John, even though we're sort of running out of time, because we have a follow-up to that exact thing. As Mitch mentioned, Karsten was using Google Authenticator and couldn't sync his two-factor codes to a new device. Gary and many, many others of you, of course, recommends, he says, I'm a 1Password user, so I could have done it that way, but doesn't like the idea of using one app for both factors of authentication, because that sort of defeats the purpose at some level. I totally get it. He says, but I replaced Google Authenticator with an app called Authy, A-U-T-H-Y, which does synchronize across all my devices. So synchronizing across devices is also a potential security vector, right? Because the more places that data exists, the greater potential of a breach. But keeping it from being in the same app as your password sort of honors the concept of two-factor authentication a little better. So yeah, that's good. Thank you, Gary, and everybody who recommended Authy for that, because that certainly seems like the right answer. All right, John, should we blow through a couple of cool stuffs found here?
Sure.
Okay. Steve shares with us some, well, if we go back a couple of years, we would be very, very happy about this news. But Steve shares, he says, I got my Tidbits newsletter and it announced the release of Fujitsu ScanSnap Manager 7 for Catalina. He says, I've been hobbling along, keeping my old but still working ScanSnap S510M scanner via a Parallels instance of Mojave. Until now, this was the only way to keep my ScanSnap running using the Fujitsu software, which ran better than any third-party app I've found. But it was stuck in 32-bit land and thus not usable in Catalina until now. Version 7, he says, worked perfectly with the new software. And there you go. He says, I'm happy to have this functioning natively again. So good news, I think. So does your ScanSnap scanner was in this purgatory too, John, or was yours one of the ones?
No.
Okay.
Well, the other option, and we had some people, I think, write in about this. So they introduced a new piece of software called ScanSnap Home.
Okay.
And that is 64-bit, so you can run it under Catalina. Unfortunately, the feedback I've gotten from a couple of people is that it's very picky about which scanners it supports.
Right.
And it doesn't support, which is weird because it's like, it's from the same company. So it's like, and why would you exclude certain scanners from the 64-bit software? Mine fortunately worked with the
Okay, so
you
weren't stuck in that. Got it. Okay.
But yeah, I guess they purged some very old, because ScanSnap scanners for the most part are not standards compliant, so you have to use their software in order to get it to work. Right.
Makes sense. All right, cool. John, we have a cool stuff found recommendation, but it is definitely a cool stuff found reprise. I am pretty sure this is the very first thing we ever mentioned as cool stuff found. And in fact, I think we mentioned it once before we even thought of the concept of cool stuff found. But listener Dan was writing in and says, I've got old Microsoft Word, like 5.1 files and Cricut Graph files, and I need to know how to convert those to some usable format. Do you know of a service? And so this brings us back to our very first cool stuff found, which is Zamzar at ZAMZAR.com. I think we were in single-digit episodes when we first stumbled on and mentioned Zamzar, John. It's got thousands of different file converters there, and I've used it many times over the years. I don't know if it'll do exactly what Dan needs, but you know, that's the place to start. If you don't have the apps and you need to convert something to something more compatible, try Zamzar. You do have to upload your file to them. So if it potentially has, you know, confidential information or whatever, you need to make that distinction and decision on your own. But yeah, there you go. So Zamzar, cool stuff found. Blast from the past. It's good. Another blast from the past on cool stuff found comes from Gary, who says, thank goodness for Doug's Scripts at DougScripts.com. He says, have you any idea how miserable it would be to correct typos on 400 versions of some song in your iTunes or music library? You don't need to know, because Doug Scripts has a script to fix this for you. And indeed, Doug's been making Apple scripts for iTunes and now all of Apple's media apps for years. And so if you need to do a batch job on some of your media, music, movies, whatever, check Doug Scripts first. If they don't have the exact thing you need, they might have something you can download and kind of look at the code and tweak it. So we love Doug Scripts. So thank you for sharing that, Gary. Good stuff. Any thoughts on that, John, before we take our last one?
Nope.
All right. Well, there is one final one for today, and that is cool stuff found. Really, it's cool stuff made from listeners Allison and Bart. It's sent to us by Allison. Over at Podfeet for years, she's been doing a podcast with Bart Bouchatz called Taming the Terminal. And now they've released a book with all of the tips and things that they learned from Taming the Terminal. So we've put a link for that. It's available on Apple Books, and they've got Kindle and PDF and HTML versions available too. So congrats on the release of the book.
No analog version?
Oh, probably at Amazon. I mean, Amazon. So, not to steal the spotlight, but I'll join the thunder at my one of my other podcasts, Small Business Show. We just released our first book, and we're actually on our way to releasing our second. We released a book about mistakes, because it's one of the things we love the most, is all the lessons that we learn from the stupid mistakes we make. And so we put our favorite mistakes that have been shared by us and our guests on the show. We ask every guest on the show, what's your favorite mistake? And so we collected our favorites and we put them out there, and we put it in the Kindle publisher at Amazon. But, I've got hard copies of the book. They print them up, and, so I would imagine Taming the Terminal, unless I think Allison can check a box whether they want to allow print copies or not. But I think Amazon very much wants to have print copies. I've got another friend who is actually the same friend that my co-author and the person who sort of drove the bus on this, my co-host Shannon Jean over at Small Business Show. He's got another book. He has a business selling on Poshmark, and he wrote a book about Poshmark, and he found that Amazon had lowered the price on his print book because more people were buying it that way. He gets the same royalties, but Amazon was like trying to goose sales of it. So they like mess with pricing. Yeah, they just took like a lower cut. I don't know, something. Maybe I'm interpreting it all wrong. But yeah, Amazon likes to have, options for everybody. So yeah. Anyway, I think that's I don't know. That's what we got for now. So, right? I think we're good for today, John.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Let's see if I can bring the band in. Yeah, they are.
There they are.
Yeah, I found the band. It's good. They were right over there. There somewhere. I don't know. No, I don't know.
You left them outside sweating? Oh man.
Well, it's social distancing,
Terrible.
John. They've got to, that's how it works. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for listening. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions and tips and cool stuff found today. That's how we do what we do. So very, very fun and very, very good stuff. Thanks for visiting all our sponsors. Of course, the ones in the episode, burrow.com/MGG, barebones.com, mac.cashfly.com. What's wrong, John? Did I get it wrong? Okay. What did I get wrong?
No, I did.
Oh, okay.
Still trying to figure out the camera.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
There we go.
There it is. I know. Yeah, doing this video thing. I have to look at where my microphone is and decide which way to point based on that. Right? Like, I see that my microphone in the camera is to my right, but in my face, it's to my left. So if I want to point at you, I have to do that. It's very weird. Very weird. For those of you that want to watch this on video, it is available on YouTube, our Mac Geek Gab podcast channel there, Facebook as well. We stream it live, audio and video when we record. We try our very best to make sure that all the content is valuable via audio, but sometimes it's fun to talk about the video and that sort of thing. So feel free. They're up. And I mean, yes, they are on YouTube and Facebook, but you can just see them at macgeekgab.com. We link them in the articles and all that stuff. I guess we should put them up as a downloadable feed, too. I didn't even think about that until right now. Huh. Quarantine project number 52. All right. Hey, why not? That's how we'll do it. All right. What else do we have here, John? If you want to send us a voicemail, you can do it one of two ways. You can download the Mac Geek Gab iOS app, which is free. And that has an easy way to record and send in audio comments. Or you can call us at 224-888-GEEK, which, John, is
4335.
That is correct, my friend. All right. Well, thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us. Thanks to check out all our other sponsors at macgeekgab.com/sponsors. We keep a list there of all the active deals, even if they're not active sponsors, just so that you get your deals. It's good. Sometimes sponsors call us and ask us to take them off that list because they're like, people are still finding these deals. Like, yeah, they're active. We're going to tell them about them. John, we've shared a lot of advice in this episode. Mm-hmm. Do you have any other advice to share?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And it consists of not one, not two, but 3 words. And those 3 words are, don't get caught.
Made on a Mac.
Seems legit to me.